So hi everyone, lovely to see you. It's nice to see some familiar faces. Welcome to Creative Bravery 2021. I can't believe that it's already a year since we all talked about winging it last year. I just wanted to let you know that I'm recording this session and I'll be putting it onto my YouTube channel, which has only one other video, which is last year's winging it session. And then I'll send the link to the Creative Bravery Collective, and so they can publish it on their website so other people can access it if they are interested. And I would just like to acknowledge that I am on Whadjuk country, which is the lands of the Noongar Nation. And I would like to pay my respects to the ancestors and to the elders past, present and future, and acknowledge their contribution to my life in this city and this region, which in colonial terms is called Perth, Western Australia. And that's just a little slide to show you what that means. So I'm in Perth, which is also called Burruloo in Noongar language, and it's part of the Whadjuk area, and the Noongar Nation takes up all of that area of southwest Australia. And so on to winging it. Last year I got together with a group of you and we talked about winging it and whether it's a valid way of behaving or working or approaching lessons in a learning environment. So I've just got a couple of little memes here. I'm going to wing it, which is me, usually about something that maybe I shouldn't wing. Winging it has a bit of a negative kind of connotation. People generally don't think that we should be winging it, such as this next slide, the artist thinking I'm going to add a baby and I'll just wing it, and that's what happens. You end up with a baby with an ugly old man's face there. But then I came across this little comic. I've gotten by on imaginative and innovative thinking. In other words, I make it up as I go along, and I wondered maybe that is actually something to do with winging it. And I came up with my kind of own definition of winging it, and linked it to practice-led. As an artist, I do a lot of practice-led workshops. So I help or teach other people to make art in the way that I approach art making myself as an artist. So I wondered if that kind of idea could be applied to learning environments. Came up with this kind of my own definition of practice-led teaching, which just means that you rely on everything that you know, that you've learned, that you've experienced as a human, as an educator, and you just do it. You just help people learn, instead of writing really elaborate and drawn out plans for every single thing that you do. Oh, sorry, I've just got someone waiting to come in. Hi, Kevin. I hope that you can hear me. I'm just going through some of my ideas about what winging it is from last year's Creative Bravery Festival. And my call for action was for all of us to have a go at winging it. So wing it with intention, not necessarily with a goal to achieve at the end, but just with an intention to wing it, just to try and let go of all of that control and all of that kind of anxiety about planning every single outcome that we have during a lesson or in our learning environment, and just give winging a go. Rely on our intuition, on our own knowledge, and do it with grace, you know, honor that knowledge and that experience that we have, and be generous and kind to ourselves about doing that. So really what I wanted to do today or tonight that was my call to action. Wing it with intention, trust yourself, notice what happens, reflect on what happened, share your experiences, and practice. So I wondered if you guys would be interested in sharing times that you have winged it with me and let me know what happened. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and ask for volunteers. And I'm just going to try and unmute you, Kevin.
Andrea, I'm happy to jump in because your session last year made a real impression on me. I really,
wow.
And it's been really interesting actually throughout. And I was so glad that I saw you were running another session, because it's definitely kind of a theme that I took away and have really been conscious of. And in sort of, and almost thinking, oh, what would Andrea do? And a couple of weeks ago, I was doing a face-to-face facilitation, and I'm just getting, so it's probably only the second time I'd done, and I've already got my plan. I was, I plotted things out, I'd got activities and all sorts, and kind of rocked up into this session. And within the first 10 minutes, it kind of became quite clear that there was stuff going, like I needed to not deliver what I'd planned. And I was really consciously kind of thinking, oh, okay, I need to wing it here. And I think the difference was that I kind of owned it in the room. And I was like, look, I have a plan, and I've planned this session and there's stuff that we could do, but I'm feeling, I felt that the group needed time to just get what was on their chest off their chest and park it almost before they could even focus on anything else. But interestingly, as they were sharing their challenges and issues, that became the kind of shaper of the day. And then I could go back to my plan and kind of weave some of those things in, but with the focus that it was really around their challenges. And so I think that's the difference. I think I probably did wing it previously, but maybe it was something I was a bit like, I felt bad about. I was a bit ashamed. It's like, oh God, my planning was terrible. I didn't judge this right. I didn't pitch this right. Whereas now I'm like, look, actually, it doesn't feel right. So it's important that this day is useful for everybody. So how are we best going to use it together? And I probably wouldn't have done that so openly previously. And that was,
Oh,
that was really noticed.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Jane. That's really great. And that's exactly what we did talk about last year, is this kind of fear that if we haven't planned everything and then deliver that plan to the 9th degree, that somehow we're failing. And I was trying to work out ways that we could turn that on our head and actually trust that intuition that we all have, and trust the absolute wealth of knowledge and experience that we have as educators or as artists or whatever it is that we do in our kind of working lives or teaching, educating kind of lives, that most of us, we do actually have a bit of an idea about what we're doing. And we shouldn't have to necessarily prove that every time on a bit of paper. Oh, good on you. I'm glad you did that. I had an experience a couple of weeks ago on a holiday with my family. We drove about 4 hours north of Perth to a place called Geraldton, and another hour past that is another place called Kalbarri, with these gorgeous beachside gorges of beautiful natural environment. Normally, I would do a lot of research about where we would go, what we would do, how long we would stay at places. This time I decided that we would wing it. There was just one road in and one road out, and I thought we'd just look at the signs that led to these gorges and just decide on the spot which ones we'd go down to have a look at. And two things happened. I had absolute anxiety about missing out on some really fantastic Instagram-worthy picture if we went down the wrong road, which was not good. But the second thing that happened, which was great, I didn't have any particular expectations about how good or bad something would look like. So everything was very new and a surprise. And I think that kind of letting go of that control meant that I could appreciate it, the experience of being in that place a lot more. And I think that those kinds of things can probably happen in a learning environment too. Expectations can be different if we let go of them slightly. So anyone else? Is there anyone that's stuck on mute?
I'm able to unmute, so I'll jump in.
Jack. Okay, how did you go? Trying to unmute everybody else while you're talking.
I feel like what you're saying about control and like planning, I think is definitely something that I relate to. I'm a creative practitioner, facilitator, and I think that's still one area in which I still maybe I'm definitely getting better at, but I definitely did struggle with is I've set myself a plan. And so if I don't stick to that plan and I hit bam, 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 then somehow I'm letting myself down, or I'm not doing my plan justice, and I'm not, maybe I'm not as good at the job that I have. But in actual fact, I think it's kind of what you were saying, Jane. I think there's that element when you're coming off plan and you're actually really responding to what's going on in the room, I think is when I'm the best at the work that I do, because you're really responding to the group dynamic and what's going on and the energy. And I think that's definitely something that as I've got older and more confident in the work that I deliver, that I think is maybe it's like a little circle. Maybe it's being able to come off the plan and trust that I know enough about what I do and how I do it to come off the plan and to support the room and support most of the young people that I work with in a different way that's off the plan. And in actual fact, it's that kind of circle. And just echoing what you were both saying about, I think is definitely something that I'm really continuing trying to work hard on, is that sticking to a plan and coming off the plan and responding and being reflective and being, I think, and that's where I think if you're good at what you do, you are always responding and always being reflective. And I think it's great to hear just other people's experiences of that as well.
Yeah, I really like the word responsive. I think that maybe that kind of practice-led teaching idea that I was thinking about, and using intuition really helps us to be more responsive. Whereas if we're a bit worried about sticking to a plan or having that control, then it's very hard to be responsive to other people's needs in the room.
And also to follow something as well. Like if there's something, if it's going in that direction and that feels good, then why wouldn't you run with that and follow that and go in that direction as well, rather than sticking to your plan?
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. Thank you.
One of the things, sorry, I know I'm jumping in again, this is on my head, in my head. One of the things I've been really wondering, I'm involved in like coach education and developing education for sports coaches. And I look at like the pathway from level 1 is like the first qualification up towards level 4. And there's so much emphasis on planning, like the cycle is plan, do, review. So you plan, you deliver it, then you review what could be better. And I suppose the question in my head is, how do we need to be, so like the word intuition, does it really exist? Are we really intuitive? Or is it because of all the experiences we've had and that enables us to be intuitive because we can draw on that experience? And I don't know, but how do we, I suppose my broader question is, is the planning training essential as you're learning, or actually do we need to bring some of this winging it in, like so that we, it's not about planning is success, and if you plan something and deliver it exactly as it is on the tin, then you passed your qualification. How do we build in that and support individuals right from the start to be able to wing it, or practice led, whatever we want to call it, because it feels really important to me. And it feels like, it's only now, like years into what I've been doing, that I'm kind of almost okay with it and I'm doing it proactively. Whereas actually, how do we Yeah, how do we bring that in earlier in an education process?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And my immediate thought was to go back to the original kind of definition of winging it, where that phrase comes from, which is an expression from the 1800s theatre, where the students who were studying a part would stand in the wings. So there's something there about, because that doesn't really say intuition as such, it's that they were spending time with the experts, the actual actors, watching them, being with them and learning from them. And so that's them winging it. So I'm not sure how would we, maybe by modeling that idea, that, because I still do think some kind of planning or some kind of ideas of what you're going to do and how you're going to do it is needed. My kind of idea is that we don't have to be writing these very elaborate lesson plans for every single eventuality that might happen in our learning environment, in our classroom or our studio. So maybe there's a way that some aspects of that could be freed up when we're learning how to be coaches or teachers or actors, whatever it is that we might be doing. Maybe there's a better way of modeling that. Yeah, I don't know. I'd be interested if anyone else has any ideas of how that might work. Anyone?
Is it all right if I come in now?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Everything's kind of frozen and sort of can't see anybody, so I just assume that you're all there. I was thinking back when I first started teaching a long time ago. I was very fortunate that my peer teachers that I worked with came from a Gestalt background and were teaching social work and social care. And we would do, there would be a lesson plan. And I think that your own anxiety makes you want to plan everything to death. So there's nothing spontaneous can possibly happen. But they were really good about just setting out what is it we really want students, what is the kind of thing that would be really important by the end of this time for them to know or to have experienced. And I think that's been really useful of the letting go. So there may be an idea of an introduction or a sense of it, but I think what I've realized over about the sort of 30 years of teaching and facilitating is the more you let go and the more you really allow space for other people's voices, the more people get out of a session. And, that kind of talking to people. And I used to have a job which was about helping develop teaching across a college and then nationally over lots of colleges. And it's the biggest problem is teachers quite often think unless they're talking, people are not learning. And it's that belief that if you could let go and just create the conditions for a good conversation or a good interaction or communication, that's your job. As long as you know roughly the direction that you need to be going in, actually people have got a lot more creativity. And it's almost like when you plan, you plan as if people don't have any ideas. So I think it takes confidence to let go and belief that it will be okay in the end. But I think you have to sit with that. You have to sit with being not knowing and not necessarily comfortable and see what emerges. So anyway, that's just my thoughts on that.
I really like that because I'm quite big on the pause, taking time to take a breath or to pause with things. I think really interesting things can happen to us if we just stop and be silent maybe. And maybe a lot of our training, we're just overthinking stuff and overcomplicating. I think there's a lot of like a burden of proof that you have to prove that you're learning by, if you're learning to, Jane, you're talking about coaching, if you're learning how to coach, you have to write a lesson plan that proves that you're learning and that you're doing it right, I guess. So yeah, maybe we'd have to let go of some of those ideas.
I think that's a really interesting, Karen, like the idea of letting go and being comfortable with that. And I kind of think about, I suppose, the structures I'm involved in, and there's a sense of power, like the coach educators and assessors. There is a look, and this is being really generalistic because there are some really amazing people out there, but in general, there's this sense of power awarded to people to say, I have the power to pass or fail you. And it's, you know, even though the language, we're trying to shift the language and have been from competent to not yet competent and all of this kind of language, there's still that sense of the coach educator being in control and bestowing a qualification and those kind of things. And particularly in sport, because that's how they learned. So they had to turn up and that's how they were assessed. And I know, you know, I'm thinking of some horrendous experiences I used to work in golf where, you know, there were people like, well, I had to do that. I had to be grilled for an hour, so why shouldn't they? It's like, okay. So it kind of, there's an unpicking there because, I mean, you know, if we could have people like the people that were around you when you were learning, Karen, that feels really positive. So it's like that culture shift and how we it's not about I tick the boxes. It's about actually, can you listen? Can you, Jack, I love that word respond as well. Can you respond and can you go with the flow and create a session where people go away going, yeah, actually, that feels good. I'm taking something away and I'm going to do something and I feel able to do something different.
Because I find that really fascinating in a sports environment, that the idea of intuition, and even you just said they're going with the flow. I would have thought that flow and intuition is actually quite an important part of being a sports person. You know, just having that gut feeling to reach or to do something in particular at a particular time is what makes sports people really good at sport. Yeah. So
yeah, we could get into a whole different debate there about overcoaching and rigidity and structure and decision making.
Yeah. All right. Does anyone else have any experiences of winging it?
Sorry, folks. I
Hey, Kevin, we can hear you.
I've potentially been very distracted. My work laptop decided it didn't like Zoom anymore, so it threw me out. So apologies if I've missed anything important. It sounds like I probably have. I guess I wanted to share that when I was looking at the Creative Bravery kind of program of events, this really stuck out to me. And Karen will probably know what I'm about to say, but I guess I was thinking around professional winging it. So I completely agree with Jane. I heard a lot of what you said and really kind of have had experiences of that where you kind of need to put aside everything that you plan to do and kind of in that workshop environment. But I'm thinking around for me in terms of day to day. I feel very much like I'm winging it right now. And part of that is kind of working in a large, complex public organization. There's an element of having to wing it because the system dictates that if you want to get good stuff done, you have to wing it to get that good stuff done some of the time. So I'm kind of learning to do that as I go. And I was thinking as well that a lot of it falls down to relationships. So a lot of the time you have a sense of something that you want to do or something that's needed. And you have to just kind of let it go and kind of let it kind of mature and kind of flex and shift as the kind of idea matures, I guess, as the people corral around it. And that's when I was thinking of winging it, that's exactly what I thought about. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. So there's a lot of similar things, relationships, responding, getting stuff done, maybe needs to have an element of winging it. I know that last year when we met to talk about winging it and someone asked the question about doing a presentation to sponsors, that maybe that wouldn't be the best time to be winging it. And that did lead to that kind of conversation and thinking about, well, maybe winging it is best when you already have the skills and experience and the knowledge that you can rely on to do it. That if you're in a completely foreign environment and you don't have those relationships built, then yeah, maybe winging it's not so good. It might be a bit like when I ignore the GPS on my car because I've got the intuitive sense that I should be turning right, whereas the GPS is telling me to go straight. You know, I'm not a GPS machine, so I probably should just listen to the GPS and not go with my intuition in those circumstances. So yeah, maybe it's a bit like that. Anyone else? Carissa, my friend, do you have anything that you would like to say?
Because I'm a professional wing it person. I work with children, so winging it is a, how do you call it? It's just very, very, I think it's a core when you work with children, especially the benefit for me though, because I'm in the creative arts, you have your plan, but then you have to also read the situation of your children. So, but then you can sort of steer it creatively. So at the end of the sort of say time, you can easily, not easily, organically make it succinctly with the plan. So there's a lot of winging it in my day life. And now I'm also working with adults doing art sessions, and Andrea is my colleague there. And also in my class, it's the same situation where I have this plan, we're doing this is mixed media. But then if I see the situation or I assess how my group is today, I might say, okay, let's be a little bit flexible and organic and see where we're heading. And then, yeah, then you go see what was the plan today. And it's sort of like, okay, if it doesn't work, that's okay. But it's always, for me, it's also important to see the process. And like, I think it was Karen that you mentioned, like what is really important for them to learn or for them to achieve. And so that's always at the back of my head when I deliver or facilitate a session with either children or adults. But yeah, I agree with Andrea. Winging it is substantial in my life. It's important. Yes. Yes, Paul.
Did you have your hand
It's so
up?
good to hear you guys again. Yeah, I did. I put my hand up, which is like really unlike me. I don't know what's wrong with it. So yeah, I wondered if like the Simon Sinek stuff about why comes into sort of play here. I think you can only wing it if you have purpose, which is your why. And I think that's the problem, that if you don't know why you're doing it, you don't have purpose, I think that then makes you underconfident, as Karen suggested, that it has to have a certain sense of confidence. And for me, I think confidence comes when there's a greater understanding of why you are doing the thing that you are doing. Like, what is your purpose here? And I think there's too many people who know the sort of how to do something, but they don't go into the why, where that how sits. So what we see is a procession of sort of how tasks. So if I do this, then this, then this, then this, then that's my job done. And there's no room for winging it within that. And I think the winging it becomes scary because ultimately the purpose, this is Simon Sinek, this is not me, but the purpose should be the thing that's unachievable almost, like it's impossible. It's this infinite thing. And if it's infinite, it would suggest that we don't know how to do it. And so all of that comes into play. And I think why, like what Carissa was saying is interesting within an early years sort of conversation. I think, again, what we're talking about now is play, because within play, there is a sense of winging it. But play is always purposeful as long as the child is set in it. It stops being purposeful when the adult comes in with purposeful play. I would argue, Carissa might disagree. And play is definitely one of the emerging themes within this. And my final thought is the idea of listening. And I would argue you could only wing it if you know how to listen. Because what listening, deep listening, proper listening does is set up a relationship that identifies, looks for, and celebrates these tensions or differences that then will allow the opportunity for winging it to happen within the sort of frame or structure of the purpose. What I don't see enough of within our education systems are educators who are willing to move into that dangerous listening zone, which then opens up the possibility of winging it, where I would argue like deep creative learning happens.
I really like that, Paul. And I was just, sorry, Andrew, I was just thinking, because when Andrew, you said about the, you know, you wouldn't wing it when you were pitching for a sponsor. And I'm kind of thinking, but would you? And if you look at winging it, maybe in that vein that you've just taught, I think the why is really important. So what is the purpose? So what is the outcome I desire? Or we desire? And in that, so if you use that sponsorship example, it's actually you want investment. But actually then if you kind of think, well, actually what I've got to do is listen. Yeah, I'm going to start this and start presenting, but actually I've got to listen and I've got to watch what people's responses are, which in a classroom would be, as Carissa was saying, you know, you're watching and responding and listening to, so you're listening. And then you're trying to build really quickly that rapport in those relationships. So you can, you know, that might be on a long-term basis in a classroom or with a group of people you work with regularly. But actually, if you can kind of get a bit of rapport going really quickly by listening and understanding people, then you have got confidence because you've got a purpose and clarity. But you're kind of then able to, and it might not be massively winging it, but you're at least able to adapt and flex and go with the flow of what you're hearing from people. Because if you just went in and just presented and ignored any cues, but be they verbal or body language or whatever, then arguably you're just going in and delivering your plan. But if you can go in and you can listen and you can gently respond and kind of work within that frame, then arguably you're more likely to build rapport, connection, and therefore a more positive outcome. So I don't know, I'm going away thinking maybe you can always wing it if it's the basis of listening, responding, and having a clear purpose and building rapport.
I've had a bit of experience recently sitting on interview panels for work, and I'm the sort of person that does wing it in terms of job interviews, because if I over prepare, then I get panicked and I'm like, oh, that question doesn't match what I've written down. So not that I'm advising this, but I don't prepare for interviews. I kind of research the job and research the organization and get a sense of that, but I don't practice interview questions because you don't know what's going to be asked. But being on the other side, you can tell immediately the people that have rehearsed interview questions because they're not really listening to the question. They're trying to cram their practiced answer into your question, and it's really really visible, and it comes back down to that deep listening thing. So, and it would, I always think it's such a shame because it would be so much easier if they just sat back and relaxed and listened to what we're asking because they know their stuff. So yeah, sorry, just to share that.
That actually reminded me of politicians when they're asked questions and they don't actually answer the question.
But that's different, Andrea, because they don't actually know their stuff.
But I think they're not listening, are they? They're not listening. They're not trying to cultivate or build a relationship. They actually don't know. They don't have a particular purpose, maybe. They don't really know why or what they're doing. So, yeah, maybe that applies to all of them.
did you see there was a brilliant example in Britain today? Dominic Raab, who he's some sort of secretary now. He was foreign secretary, but he's been moved because he was shit. He suggested misogyny was both hatred from men to women and women to men, and the journalist said, well, actually the dictionary definition is this, and he took that like it was a second, and he just completely ignored it, and it was priceless.
I wonder as well.
Sorry, go
Oh,
on.
sorry, Anne. No. I was thinking about that whole thing, really listening, and about how comfortable you are with emergence. I think about some of the work I do around complexity, and when we've got very complex issues and people coming. So you might have you might think you've got an outcome. I'm just kind of questioning the outcome bit. So you might think this is why we're here, but actually, if you really listen to people, something else might emerge. There may be another thing. I was thinking about when we did some work on sectarianism with people, some key leaders from around Scotland and Ireland around that. And then somebody talked about, how awful it was, and the hatred and things and violence that goes on between people. And then someone's just out of nowhere kind of came this, what would Scotland look like if it was known to be a peaceful nation? What would that mean to people? And it's a completely different question, because we were really focusing on where the sectarianism takes place, but actually, what would it take? So it's a kind of quite an imaginative question, but it started to change the nature of the discussion about what would that mean and what would it look like and who would be involved in that, and kind of people got, it spun off into all sorts of things. But I think that had we stuck to, well, we're here to talk about this, and and these are kind of leading experts on sectarianism, so you could sit within where they were comfortable, but actually having some space for someone to come up with a completely different question, I think was part of that winging it, but intentional winging, that you allow enough space for something else that you don't know what it's going to be, and so the direction may well change. So I think there's a bit of, we can be too goal orientated and too focused on an outcome and miss the complete point of what's actually really important to people.
Yeah, I really agree with that, Karen, because I was thinking pretty much along the same lines, that if we're talking about how important it is to listen, then my concern is the way that we have our current kind of school or learning structures operate is there's not a lot of room for that listening to happen. For teachers in a classroom setting with a really busy curriculum, which are the learning outcomes that need to be assessed. There's just not a lot of time for that listening, and I'm really quite sad about that and quite fearful of the future, because we will miss out on all of those, like you said, those amazing opportunities to go in a completely different direction, but learn in a much richer kind of way about the things that are important to people, to the students or children or our communities. So yeah, I don't know how we can change that.
I think maybe for me it comes back to the Paul that you talked about, the why. And I think the example you've just kind of given there, Karen, I'm thinking, well, maybe the why was, well, we know there's a problem here, and it's the kind of looking beyond. It's, are we solving do we tend to fall in love with solutions before we really understand the problem? And I think maybe if, like, when I'm talking about outcomes, maybe there's a bit around contextualization as well, because if you're pitching for sponsorship or you're pitching for investment, there's actually something really clear in there about, right, I'm going into this meeting because I want money. The key, so that's an outcome, but the key is I've got to convince these people why they should give me that money. And that comes down to the why. So you've got the clarity of the why, and in your head, you know what a successful outcome is. But within that framework, there's a need to be able to wing it and listen and respond within that. And equally, there may come a point where you're there going, actually, their why doesn't match my why, I'm not going to get this investment. So I may as well kind of ditch it now. Or the job, you know, the job interview scenario, Kevin, you know, actually somebody who's genuinely coming and listening, maybe go, actually, do you know what? This isn't the right environment for me, and be able to make that decision there in that, rather than kind of going in with I've got to sell my soul and this is where I'm at. So it's maybe the why, and thinking about in educational terms, maybe, you know, I think it probably is, there is a challenge around what the outcomes are, because are the outcomes everybody gets an A star, thanks very much, or actually are the outcomes we're developing a generation of people who can listen, who can respond, who can hear, who can question, who can explore, who can sit with the complexity that we know is only going to get more. And that's maybe where the shift that needed.
What I would add to that, Jane, as well, I think there's something about evidence and trust that's where the mindset shift has to sort of change. That I think there's too many passengers within the system that rely on predetermined evidence that their participants, learners, whoever, sort of just go through a procession that is already known, because someone somewhere has decided that evidence is more important than the emergent evidence and data that is on a day-to-day. And so the outcome remains the same probably, but actually the journey of getting to that outcome feels very different. But I think that's about trust, which I suppose is about confidence of the process, and the ability to sort of move away from that silo of evidence. I find it dead interesting at the moment that schools in Scotland seem to be championing these mental health champions. So there's primary school kids walking about with badges that say I'm a mental health champion or something along those lines. And I just wonder where that came from. And I wondered if there was a better way of looking at mental health within our school systems that might allow us to move away from this sort of tokenistic gesture. And I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm just saying that I wonder if it actually will address mental health when what you do is enroll children into this, I don't know, tokenistic and manipulative sort of play, which doesn't actually address the sort of underlying complex issues around mental health within our children and young people and communities and families. But we can only do that if, as Karen suggested, we're willing to look beyond the initial question, or hold the complexities of that question and ask everyone to be involved in that conversation. Yeah.
Sorry, I know I'm talking a lot. I'm just getting really excited. Well, where it comes from, Paul, sport, they've over the last, you know, with pandemic has prompted it. There's now a duty of care badge. There's a mental health first aider for coaches badge. And I've done like that because I was like, oh, I'm curious about this. I'll go on it. And I was like, okay, right, tick. I've done my tick. I've got my digital badge. I'm sorted now. And that's it. It's like there's a stamp that says you can do this, and it's tick boxing. It's not getting to the root, which actually, if you develop a real human-centered approach where you listen and you understand, actually all the things we've been talking about for winging it, build rapport, listen, respond, then you're creating that more. But so it's almost like what's happening in schools is a replication of what's happening in organisations, in sports systems, in everything else. So it is being imprinted rather than, okay, what do we actually need?
I think we're all like nodding our head in agreement there, Jane. It's like a I don't know, self-perpetuating, this out of control organism that's just, it exists and just replicates over and over again. This system that's kind of controlled, it's a very controlling system, and it's hard to kind of fight against that. And maybe that's why so many of us struggle to wing it, because there is so many layers of this kind of, I don't know how to describe it, corporation or whatever, that prevents us from doing that, from doing all of the deep listening and the responding and the winging it. So how do we try and fight against that system? How can we change all of this tick box outcomes, badges for mental health or first aid responders. Can we wing our way out of it?
I've been just reflecting on that conversation, and I'm thinking there's almost like it's how we hold that complexity, not just for ourselves and the people that we work with in whatever context, but often the challenges come around senior leaders in any position of power, because they are thinking about risk, and their solution to managing risk is often that tick boxy thing because it looks good on paper, but it's actually not the right solution to risk. So if I can confidentially share this, in my own organization, there's been an internal staff survey that shows that staff aren't following bureaucratic processes because the process is too cumbersome. So actually, in terms of governance and mitigating risk, the senior leaders think there's a process and it's tick boxy and that's great, but actually it's not working because people aren't following it because it's too big. So what they actually need is something that's more holistic and focused on people and all the stuff that we've been talking about. So I'm wondering, sorry, I feel like I'm rambling. I'm just wondering if there's something around how we hold complexity within senior leadership to be able to help them understand, bye Paul, to help them understand kind of what we're talking about when we mean winging it, because it's actually the right approach sometimes, most of the time. So
is there anyone that is like a senior leader that could? No.
I'm kind of thinking what
Trojan mice here.
I'm drawn to what Karen was saying earlier, though, like about how powerful it was for her to have those role models when you were you know, people. And I'm kind of thinking of, you know, me saying, actually, I owned it and was overt with what I was doing in terms of actually, look, I had a plan, but I'm chucking it out and starting again, almost. Maybe not quite like that, but actually, maybe by us kind of in certain environments where we are winging it, maybe we own it and kind of acknowledge it, and but explain the thought processes and what's going on, and kind of be really, you know, really obvious around saying, actually, okay, this feels like this is what I'm hearing is this stuff that's going on for you that feels really important, right? Look, let's have a pause, let's listen, and let's really understand so that we can make this time together really effective. And that's definitely something new from me, being that obvious with it. And I wonder whether being able to do that and kind of almost that role modeling in an obvious way might help other people feel that it's okay to do the same. And if you're doing that with young people, then right from the start, they're kind of going, oh, well, it's okay to do that, rather than feeling actually it's not okay because I didn't follow the process and I haven't got my A for ticking the boxes.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of power in like recognizing your gut feeling, which is that intuition of, you know, don't ignore that gut feeling. And certainly we do teach young children with protective behaviors. You know, if you feel like something's wrong, then, you know, honor that feeling, because you might be in danger. And so by modeling it, maybe we can show the people around us that there's actually nothing wrong with winging it. I mean, maybe we need to come up with a better name for it. If winging it has kind of a bad reputation. But yeah, there's nothing wrong with following your intuition, because it is part of listening deeply and carefully and forming relationships and all of those things.
I'm just been listening over the past few minutes, and I think there's a couple of things that what Paul was saying about play being a real kind of important aspect of this, and what you were saying, Karen, about the sectarianism, when you got asked what would it mean and what would it look like. That's like imagination, isn't it? It's imagining what things could look like. That's play, and it's the freedom to try something out. And what you were saying, Jane, about scrapping something and going, actually, let's start again. How can we, and actually saying that. And I think that's what happens in play when you're when something doesn't go to plan, or you want to start again, or you just want to scrunch up your piece of paper and start again. It's all those kind of things about stopping and listening and seeing how it's going and following something, and then it moves in a different direction, and creating and imagining what might else be possible. There's just so much of that rings true about the couple of the play sessions that have been on this week, that I've been a part of during the Creative Bravery Festival, that really kind of chime with this. And I think that there's obviously distinctions within that about what play is and then what winging it is, but there's definitely feels like there's some kind of, I was going to use symbiosis, but I don't know if that's the right word, but there's definitely some relationship between those ideas and how they can kind of, are they the same thing? Do they work in the same way? That's just what I was just hearing over the past bit, just trying to listen, you know.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. And I wonder if maybe that there's kind of a lot of talk about emotional intelligence in leadership. And so when you just connected kind of that play with winging it, maybe there's something about emotional intelligence that could lead to a more compassionate leadership that kind of uses elements of winging it. Yeah.
Sorry, Jane, on you go.
No, I was going to say, leading on from that, Kevin, you put compassionate leadership in there. There's something called authentic leadership, which I looked into for my research, my PhD research, and it picks up all of those things. So it's about fundamentally knowing yourself and being really self-aware, but then having the ability then to engage with others and see that things are relational. So it kind of, so for me, that's something I really believe in, and see as part of the solution, a solution going forward.
One of the things that
sorry, Karen, I just wanted to let everyone know that we're starting to run out of time. So
right. And actually I have to go to open another event.
I don't want you to miss out on any other sessions. So.
And it's so interesting though, and it's really nice to have a small group of people who actually have a good discussion around it. And there's that whole assumptions about what makes a good session and things, but I want to talk about ways of knowing, because I think that's often and it ties into the play and imagination and the sense that we tend to privilege the cerebral way of knowing, and we're not really we're kind of ignore the intuitive and tacit and unconscious ways, the physical ways that we know. So we might say it's winging it, but we know. So the sense that we have over time just ignored the sense of the wholeness. It ties into what Jane said there, but that sense of as a facilitator, because I mean that's my interest and what I write about, in that sense of that facilitator, when you really show up as a whole being and you use all your knowledge and understanding with that group in the moment. So it's there, and I think that's the winging it, but it's highly complex because you're pulling on everything and sharing that sometimes with the group, your sense of what might be happening. So you're going with that, this is what I'm picking up, I'm sensing this. You might be right, but you might be wrong, but at least to offer some observation to the group or the class or something back, which is beyond us, working it out in your head. Well, this is my plan and this didn't happen or that happened, and just being able to go with that. But I think having peers that you're working alongside or you can share that with, I think is a huge benefit to being able to work in that way. It's hard to work in that way. It's exhausting to work in that way on your own.
Absolutely, yeah. A lot of what you described then, Karen, is just being what I think of a good human. And so it's a little bit distressing to think of it being a good human in a learning environment or a school can be really exhausting if you're the only one doing it. But I think that's true. Any final thoughts before I wrap things up? It has actually been so wonderful to see you all and talk with you all. And you're right, Karen, it's lovely to have a smaller group to give us all an opportunity to think out loud. A lot of my stuff's just been thinking out loud, and it's really sparked a lot of stuff in my brain that I'm going to go away and have a bit more of a think, and maybe a bit more of a listen to things as well.
Yeah, thank you. I really enjoyed it, and it was really nice to be able to reconnect after a year.
Yeah, I was really thrilled to see some of your names on the ticket sales that I recognised from last year. So that was really fantastic. Yeah.
And I definitely have a "what would Andrea say" moments. Like literally, it's like this little thing in my back of my head, and it's like, oh, that's really helpful. Yeah, I'm winging it. Great, and it's okay. You make
so
it okay
lovely.
to wing it.
Because my most favourite one is "What would Dave Grohl do?" Because I'm such a big fan of his. So I'm always saying, what would Dave Grohl do?
Brilliant. I love it.
Jack,
Well, you can be, you're my Dave Grohl now.
Jack, did you want to say anything?
I just wanted to say I think there's just I've taken lots of notes, and I think someone who's kind of a couple of years into their career, and I think not always, but sometimes struggles with the confidence to kind of believe in yourself and actually go, right, you know your stuff, you can go and do it. I think just feels really kind of empowering, I think, just to be in a session where we're all being very open and honest about the different ways in which we exist within our roles and within the work that we do, personally, kind of professionally, and I think, more confidence in being able to go off plan and believing in yourself and believing in your intuition and the knowledge that you have and the experiences that you have to actually to go and come off the plan that we spend all that time making look really nice in our moleskin notebooks with our fancy colors and pens. Like, it's good just to scrap that and go with it. So thanks very much.
Yeah, cool. I did wonder if we could do like 100 days of winging it or something, and hashtag 100 days of winging it, and like you said, Jane, just own it and share it, let people know that we're doing it and that everything's fine. The world hasn't ended just because we're winging it. We're still doing great stuff. Yeah, I
like the idea of tweeting you whenever I wing it.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, do it.
Dave Grohl.
That'd be great.
I want it. Is the past tense of winging it? Wung it. Hi, Andrea.
Yeah,
I won.
I couldn't work out that.
Wung it or winged it?
I winged it. I wung it. Kevin, any last thoughts?
No, just thank you. I can't believe that's been an hour since I logged on. It's been a really interesting conversation. Yeah, lots to think about. And I guess it's just good knowing that you're not alone in this stuff. There is other people out there that are kind of feeling the same, and it's a bit, Karen talks about it all the time, but it's like on the edges of trying to kind of make good stuff happen. So yeah, going against the wider system. Yeah,
Carissa,
thanks everyone.
Oh, thanks, Kevin. Carissa, any last thoughts? Do I have to unmute you?
I have to unmute. Unmute.
Oh, you're here.
No, I agree. 100 days of winging it, because I think you guys are going to have winter in Scotland with summer here. And I think there'll be a winter session or something. There you go. What does 100 days of winging it look like?
And I didn't mean you had to wing it for 100 days in a row. I just thought 100 days over a whole 12-month period is, less than a third of the year. So, 100 times.
Make it a challenge.
In a year. I think we could probably do it.
Yes.
All right.
Winging it part 3, 2022.
Yeah, let's check in 12 months and see how we did.
Yeah, that'd be really good.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to sign off.
Bye.
Lovely to see you all. Take care.
You too.